Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin. This is a different kind of program where I do these long-form interviews. Sometimes we're focused like a laser on breaking news, and we're going to do some of that tonight. But I also want to use this program to give additional voice to individuals who I think are exceptionally intelligent, fairly young, and can have and will have an influence on the future of the country. I think it's my job, as I get older and older and older, to make sure we have people coming up behind us who have an opportunity to be heard. Now, two of these gentlemen who are on with us tonight have had an opportunity to be heard, but not necessarily in a form like this. Dave Rubin of the Rubin Report, he wrote that great book, Don't Burn This Book. Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA founder, he wrote a great book, The MAGA Doctrine. So I want to talk to them. I hope they'll influence additional young people. And I think this is the way that we try to address the culture in as many platforms as we possibly can. Dave Rubin, how are you, my friend?
Mark, I'm glad to be with you. And, you know, if you would have told me a few years ago that I'd be on the Mark Levin show saying that he's a guy that blazed the trail for, you know, a liberal like me, I don't know what I would have made of that. But here we are. And I told you right before we started, I live in LA for some strange reason. I'm down on vacation in Florida, the only guy I would have put a jacket on for. So here we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Dave Rubin, you weren't always a sort of libertarian / conservative. In fact, you were a progressive for much of your young career. Tell us what happened, why you decided, wait a minute, maybe these guys on the other side make more sense, and you eventually sort of moved over to what I call classical liberalism or the liberty agenda. What was it that caused you to do that?
Sure. You know, I do still consider myself even now a classical liberal, and Don't Burn This Book was my way of laying out all of my classically liberal principles that, as you're sort of implying, in a modern sense, makes you a moderate conservative or a libertarian, and we can always whittle around what those issues are and where the government should be involved or not be involved, or things like that. But yes, I was a Bernie supporting lefty. You can find videos of me 5 or 6 years ago supporting Bernie, believe it or not. There were several reasons for that. One of the things I talk about in the book is that I think if you grow up in an American public education system and getting the American culture, the American, the things that fall within the Overton window of what's acceptable in America, everyone is sort of a default lefty. You have to come to conservatism. You have to come to libertarianism. You have to come to the idea of individual rights and freedom and liberty and all the things that you've been writing about and talking about for so many years. So you sort of, if you just grow up, you're just kind of a lefty. It's sort of like, oh, Democrats are nice, Republicans are mean, liberals care about poor people, conservatives care about money, Democrats are for peace, Republicans are for war. Now, these are all silly factory setting ideas that once you dig a little deeper, you find are not true. And then I had a series of events about 5 years ago that caused my wake up. And I would say I have no problem being called a conservative at this point, just to be very clear. What really is so beautiful about the conservative movement right now is it is an extremely wide tent. You know, what's happening on the left is basically it's you're woke or you're out, meaning if you don't select these 10 things that the woke people want and you have to do it the second they want you to do it, then you're out. Well, what that does is it creates incredible opportunity for people on the right to say, hey, you know, we've got some sort of traditional conservative religious Republicans, let's say. We've got more libertarian-minded people. We've got hardcore MAGA people. We have more, you know, either neocons or more generic Republicans. That's a pretty wide swath of people. And I would say I fall a little more on the libertarian side of that. And that's a great place to have interesting debates. And what I find is when I go to, you just mentioned Charlie Kirk, when I go to Turning Point events, I talk about some things that I know that the average conservative may not agree with. And guess what? They say, hey, we're happy you're here and let's keep discussing it. Usually what they say with a smile on their face is, hey, we'll get you eventually. But they're down to have the debate where there really is no debate on the other side.
Well, let me ask you about this. Let me ask you about the other side. Even when you were, quote unquote, with the other side, was it as totalitarian? My word, was it as totalitarian as we see it today? That is, anti-free speech, anti-choice in all things but abortion, anti-intellectualism. anti so much that is important in a free society.
Yeah, no.
Was it that way 5 or 10 years ago?
No, it wasn't. And I think you know that. And I think even though most of your audience is obviously conservative and libertarian, I think they know it too. Let's not forget the ACLU, that was a liberal free speech organization. They fought so that the neo-Nazis could march in Skokie, Illinois, the famous case that everyone knows about in 1971, where they went to Illinois, neo-Nazis wanted to march, and it was a place where I think the most highest percentage of Holocaust survivors lived in the United States, and the ACLU defended their right to do it. Of course, and it's an offensive thing, but these were liberals defending the right of free expression and free speech, even when it's hard to do, which is the only time that it matters to defend free speech. Everyone says they're for free speech, but then something weird happens, and then they don't do it. Something happened. What happened to the JFK liberal? What happened to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country? I mean, really think about that statement. JFK, who was a liberal Democrat, although he did want to get out of wars, which is now not something Democrats want to do, and he also did want to reduce taxes, which is certainly not something Democrats today want to do. But ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That is 180 degrees absolute opposite of what Bernie and all of the Democrats, including Joe Biden, say now. They say, oh, we can give you this. We will give you this for free. We will artificially raise this wage. You will get free education. You will get free health care. And that's the reverse of actually what true liberalism is. So for me, it's sort of a debate on, do I want to keep trying to save the word liberalism and show people that classical liberals are actually modern conservatives, or do I just want to say, hey, I'm a conservative now? That's more of a semantic argument. But no, liberals were not always like this. The woke, totalitarian, progressive ideology that has now destroyed almost all of our cultural institutions, our educational institutions, certainly our political institutions, that is a relatively new phenomenon that was brewing at the academic level, and then it just burst forth into society. I was warning about it for a couple of years, and people kept saying to me, no, when these kids get out of college, the real world, that'll set them straight. And unfortunately, that's not how it's worked out.
You pointed out earlier, the default position is liberalism, or I guess now we would say leftism, when you come through the public education system. And you've got the teachers union, which is really quite radical, and much of the propaganda that goes on in these classrooms. But it's gotten to the point now where we actually have media outlets, the majority media outlets, trying to crush a minority of media outlets that have different opinions. We have big tech now that we all had hoped would be the competitive part against big media, which is now thrown in with big media and thrown in with one party. What do you think's happened here?
Mark, we have an extraordinary fight right now. The founders could have never imagined a structure that existed above the government. So when they wanted to limit the power of the government, they didn't think that giant corporations that could control all of our information and our ability to communicate and to actually assemble information and our ability to talk to other people, the public square that now exists online that once existed in the public square of your town, they couldn't have envisioned that there would be something so powerful. So they put all of the systems in place, the beautiful systems of the United States of checks and balances and branches of government and all of these things, but they couldn't have imagined this. And because of that, it has put us at a very perilous place where, look, it doesn't matter what you think about Donald Trump. It doesn't matter what you think about January 6th or anything else. On one given day, a bunch of tech oligarchs decided to eliminate the digital life of Donald Trump. They booted him from YouTube, from Facebook, from Twitter, from Spotify so he can't listen to music, and from Pinterest so he can't post apple pie recipes or whatever they're doing on over there. That's a scary proposition. And then, as you correctly point out, when you completely solidify that with a political ideology, when you say, okay, well, what is woke is acceptable, but if you say that there are two genders, that's not acceptable. Or if you say you're for low taxes, that's not acceptable because they'll tell you you're racist because somehow that means you don't want to help black people. They've created a very, very narrow set of things that it's okay to say. And this is a very tough one for those of us that are libertarian minded, because do you want the government to now come in and break up these companies? I mean, Joe Biden and the Democrats are in charge of the government. So do you want the government to now fix fix, you should use quotes there, do you want the government, big government, to fix a big tech problem? Well, then to me, you'd have a bigger problem. I believe in human ingenuity. I believe in competition. I started a tech company in the midst of this called Locals.com. It's just one part of the solution. And by the way, there's no perfect solution. For everyone out there that wants the perfect solution, it doesn't exist yet. We saw what Amazon did to Parler's servers. Everyone knows about that. So there's big problems across the board. But, you know, David beat Goliath. So I believe anything is possible.
But here's the thing. Is it really a free market when 5 or 6 of these massive multi-billionaires with their massive reach suck in the American people for 20 years, use their data to become enormously powerful and rich, use their power in Congress to get protection under that Rule 230. Then when you have a small entrepreneur like Parler trying to compete, they say, okay, for a variety of pretexts, we're going to crush you. And we're all going to do it together, and we're going to make sure you have no way out. I don't think that's Adam Smith capitalism. I think that's more like Vladimir Putin capitalism. And on top of that, they have politicized themselves. So it's not just that they're in the capitalist market. Now they're using their muscle, which they got in part thanks to government, to put not just their finger on the scale of politics, but to put their entire weight on the scale of politics to influence the outcome of elections. And they really don't even make any bones about it. I mean, it's pretty obvious to all. And I agree with your point. This is rather perplexing, because what do we do about this when you have one party that really has control over most of the bureaucracy, whether Republicans are in office or not? Are they really expected or capable of controlling an entity like this, or are they going to further empower an entity like this? It's a big problem, but let me ask you this. Are the Republicans really up to fighting this? I watch them, David Rubin, and this is the question I want to ask you when we come back for the next segment. I watch them, and sometimes I think to myself, other than a handful, most of them have no idea what's swirling around. They have no idea of the ideology that they face. They have no idea how that ideology has devoured so much of the culture, and they go on like corporatists, or they go on with the business of government, or whatever that means, as if none of this is happening. So that is the predicate that I want to lay for you when we come back the next segment. We'll be right back. Welcome back, America. I'm with Dave Rubin here of the Rubin Report. Don't Burn This Book was a great book that he wrote, still is, Locals.com. And I mention all that because what Dave is demonstrating, and we have a lot of young people demonstrating this, what people like me are trying to do is, you're developing, as best you can, your own independent platform. Actually, many independent platforms. So you're not reliant on 1 or 2 or 3 big entities, and one day maybe you're not reliant on any big entities, as the attack on Parler has demonstrated. So Dave Rubin, my concern is, I'll just be blunt about me. The left is diabolical in many respects. They don't want to play within the Constitution in many respects. You have Joe Biden signing over 50 executive orders and so forth, like he's Caesar. You've got the Democrats in the House and the Senate acting like they're the Roman Senate. They're off doing their own thing. They talk about the Constitution, but they don't want to work within the limits of the Constitution. They focus on the courts, how they want to change the electoral system. They're still chasing Donald Trump. And the Republicans seem to be reacting, if anything, they seem to be on their own glide path. And I don't know exactly where that glide path is going. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a really great point. And, look, we could both sit here for 10 hours and talk about all of the things that are wrong with the left and the ridiculous big government programs and that very little actual political philosophy sits behind what they're doing other than the accumulation of power. We can do that. So I like this question, because let's put that aside for a moment. As a new guy to, let's say, this broad conservative coalition, there are very few conservatives I find inspiration from. I'll give you two who I suspect you like as well, which would be Ted Cruz and Rand Paul. I think they're out there. They've been talking about big tech. They're always warning about surveillance and the ever-expanding state. They both did a really nice job when we had these hearings about big tech. But that being said, and again, I think these are good, decent men who are working hard for the American people. Let's not forget that nothing happened after those big tech hearings. You know, it's like it's a bunch of theater that we did before the election where everyone was warning about Section 230 that you talked about earlier, and then no one actually does anything. So for me, as someone that's sort of new to this side, I want to see more people that know how to fight. And I think that really was why so many people hated Trump to the level that they did. It wasn't about Trump's policies, which were sort of all over the place in terms of there was a lot of conservative stuff, but not everything conservative. There was definitely big government and spending in there as well. But the reason they hated Trump was not because of the policies. It was because he showed people how to fight. And there is nothing that the media and the big tech companies hate more, and the Democrats hate more, than someone who actually will fight. So I hope that he's able. I hope that the idea of Trump, in a way, lasts far longer than Trump the man. And any good idea has to live beyond one man. But I hope the idea of, hey, fight, guys, because we are running thin. The American experiment, as our friend Dennis Prager often calls it, might be coming to an end. The worst ideas are here, and they are eliminating all of the things that we've done so well for 250 years. So I want to see more conservatives fight.
And you raise a very, very important point. Let's take that point. It was Donald Trump who tried to get the National Defense Authorization Act amended in order to address that Section 230. He said, look, everyone's going to vote to fund the Defense Department. Republicans are going to vote to fund the Defense Department. Now you need a rider. This is what we have to do. It's not going to work independently on its own. And who votes against him? All the Democrats and most of the Republicans, and they override his veto. But your point is, well, here he showed them how to do it, and they rejected it. And now many of the same Republicans are complaining about the attack on free speech, about these big tech companies interfering in elections on behalf of Democrats and leftists, and they have in part themselves to blame because they were given an opportunity to do something about it, and they refused. In the few minutes we have left, Donald Trump. The effort now is really to destroy the man and destroy the people who support him, in my view. There is absolutely no need for impeaching and then trying Donald Trump as a private citizen. And as I've listened all week to the Democrats present their case, basically in any court in Western civilization, 99% of what they're presenting would be inadmissible. Has absolutely nothing to do with the guilt or innocence of Donald Trump in inciting an insurrection. In fact, so much of the information is exculpatory. He was the one, according to his chief of staff, who offered 5,000 National Guardsmen in early July to Washington, D.C., which they didn't take him up on. And so many other steps that were taken that raise serious questions to me. You have all this preparedness in advance by these thugs, by these militant groups. The FBI was aware of it. It goes to the terrorism task force. Nobody knows what happened. The Sergeant of Arms of both houses of Congress are informed that they need to bring in the National Guard by the now former chief of the Capitol Police. What did they do with that information? Apparently nothing. Well, did they tell their bosses, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell? We have no idea. And so all the questioning ends because the narrative is baked in. And to get answers to the narrative, that is, some of us want to know exactly what took place and who exactly was involved and exactly how we deal with this. But that's not what's happening here. Do you think that the left and the media and the Democrat Party will be successful in their effort to extinguish the Trump movement, the Trump ideas, and Donald Trump himself?
Well, look, I think your assessment is totally correct that that's what this is about. They want to destroy him further, meaning it's not enough that he's not president. It's not enough that he's not on any of the big platforms. It's not enough that he can't get his voice out there. It's now, can we actually destroy this person? Can we make sure he's never heard from again? And as I've often said related to this, you know, when they're going for Trump, they're really coming for you. And what I mean by you is they're coming for everyone watching this show. They're saying, oh, do you have any counter counter opinion, we will come for you, because look what we can do to the man who was the most powerful person in the world just a few weeks ago. Look how we can get rid of him. The sad part about this is, well, there's several sad parts, but I would say the primary sad part is that the average person in America wants nothing to do with this. I don't even think that a lot of the Democrats really want to do this impeachment, this post-impeachment sham that, you're right, the trial has had virtually nothing to do with the words that he said or anything like that. I think most people are thinking we got way bigger problems. We have economic problems, we have lockdown problems and COVID problems, and so many more important things. And the fact that this is going to be voted on in essence purely on party lines, with a couple sort of half Republicans, whatever you want to call them, like Mitt Romney, who will jump ship just so that the media will be nice to him. And when we previously talked about the Republicans who need to fight, it's like what you usually get with Republicans is sort of these Romney Republicans or the Lincoln Project guys, these people who actually fight for no conservative or right-leaning principle ever, but they get on the cable news shows, they can go on MSNBC and get pat on the head like a dog, and then handed a little snack so they feel good about themselves. So I think the idea of fight must continue, whether they get Trump on this or not, and obviously I'm not for that, but whether they get him or not, the idea of fight must continue.
I think you just coined a phrase that I love, the half Republicans. That's a very, very good phrase. David Rubin, keep up the good work. We very much enjoy your writing. We very much enjoy your broadcasting. God bless you.
Marky, thank you so much.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.